After the introduction to the symbolic language of the interior world, the next thing that we want to look at are the constitutional types. Because from the language of the different symbols that appear in the iris to tell us what's happening in the body, certain signs appear again and again and again. And we call those constitutional types. And the Germans really came up with the first group of constitutional types, except that I found them very difficult to understand because there was no sort of centered explanation. You more or less had to memorize them. They were blue-eyed ones, and there's certain signs, if you saw them, you gave certain medicines for. But for myself, it's like I always want to deeply understand what the dynamics of the body are doing to create those patterns, and what they mean in terms of how the person lives, how they function, how they age, how they develop illnesses, and so on. So a large part of my time in the 80s in England, I used to go down to London once a week to my practice, sometimes 1 day a week, sometimes 2 days a week, and I used to spend time on the train. And when I was on the train, I used to go over these thoughts. I used to sort of sink into states of reverie or concentration or dream states where I would think about these things. And then eventually it was made very clear to me that the constitutional types were based on dominant organ system and gland patterns. And so it became something that I could understand. It became something that I could build information on. It became something that helped me to greatly enhance my relationship with people, my interaction, my education, my understanding of them. And so this constitutional sheet here has all the basic patterns on it. And what we have to remember is that sometimes a person will have 2 types. Sometimes they'll have 3 types. Sometimes they'll even have as many as 4 or 5, just a little bit of several different types. So we're going to meet people who are very strong types. And we're going to meet people that do not, have such a strong type, or they have a combination of influences. Or we're also going to meet people at different stages of their evolution. At one stage, they might be completely vulnerable to the unconscious activity of their constitutional type, so that they would dramatically display it. And at another time, they may have evolved and they may have detached themselves, and been able to observe their patterns and understand it. So this is one of the great roles of Iridology, as I teach it and experience it, is to help a person to really deeply understand the constitutional type. And I actually had one of those experiences with one of the students that was meant to come to summer school and didn't come. When I was in Thailand in late May and June, I got an email. I just was on your website. I totally loved it. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm coming to summer school. I've already sent you a $500 deposit, and as soon as you come back, let's get together and I'll give you the rest of the $4,500. And I just went, wow, this sounds pretty exciting. This person really knows what they want, and good chance that we'll have a nice connection. So I wrote back and I said, great, let's get together when I come back. So the next thing I hear is about 3 or 4 days later, I get another email. I can't come, it was a big mistake. I've canceled the check, and that was that. So I went, oh, anxiety gastric. So I wrote back and I said, you may decide not to come to summer school or sign up in the school, that's fine. Only people that are really destined for it are going to do it anyway. I said, but you have a very interesting expansion and contraction theme going on in your life, and I would be very interested to meet with you and tell you. I said, I'm pretty sure I know what your constitutional type is. It's called anxiety gastric. And that kind of piqued her curiosity. And she said also, like a day or so after she had sent the email saying that she had torn up the check, she went, oh no, I've really done it. No, I've ended my relationship with the school. She'll never speak to me again. She'll never let me come to a class. And so it was like expansion, contraction, guilt and remorse, And then I kind of forgot about it. I got back. I was really busy. Then I got a telephone call. I really have to come and see you. I'm really curious about, I want to meet you. So I thought, well, this will be fun. And so we talked for a while, and then I said, well, let's go downstairs and read your eyes. I said, I'm sure that you're going to be this type. And I opened up Herbs of Grace, and I said, I'm sure that's your pattern. And sure enough, when we got downstairs, it was, but it was very, very dramatic pattern. And so I just educated her right then and there without a consultation about the expansion and contraction, the yes and the no, the fear, you know, how the lines go out that want to do things. And she said, well, actually, I said, well, what was the reason that you thought that you couldn't come to summer school after really wanting to come? And she goes, well, I decided that there's two things I really want in life. I want to be a healer and I want to help animals. And she said, after I signed up for summer school, I thought, I'm not going to be able to help the animals. And I just went, why not? It doesn't have to be an either-or situation. You can do both. You can go and work on the animals, and maybe for the 2 weeks of summer school, you won't really have time for them. I said, but you certainly would have time for them afterward. And I mean, she was a beautiful and intelligent young woman working in the pharmaceutical field. And so anyway, she signed up for summer school. And as many of you know, she came on the Saturday, and then we didn't see her on the Sunday. And on Monday, I got an email saying, my mother came into town, and I decided I can't come to summer school. I'm going to be with my mother. So that was the end of that story. But you see, this is what happens. This is a perfect example of a constitutional type that is just erratic with all of this. And no doubt on the Saturday, all the fear came up again. And then the mother was just like an excuse to push the experience away. And so with anxiety gastric, it can be very, very dramatic. And we'll go over that type a little more. But that's just to give you an idea about the emotional aspects of the constitutional types. Now, the one on the top, the immune reactive, on this particular sheet, is just a very, very thick and very dominant nerve breed. And that's what I have in my eye. And those of you that know me, it's like when I'm under stress or I get exhausted, or you know, if I'm running a program and then all of a sudden the machines don't work, to me it becomes like a life and death situation. I experience it as life and death. My adrenals pump, you know, I get all reactive. But it takes a lot to get me to that place, because I can just cruise along for weeks and months, and then when I'm running a program, things. But my immune reactive, when it kicks in, I experience it as like a life and death situation. And so it can stress me out very quickly, and I'm very, very happy to have people like Bill and Patrick and Georgia and Heidi and all those people to kind of help me ground that part of myself. And I'm certainly there for them in different ways that I contribute to their patterns, you see, because we all end up working and creating harmony together. But it's very, very important to understand our own type and how that fits into the picture, and how someone like Bill, like especially last summer with the new Iridology equipment, how he just stabilized that and non-reacted to it. It's all right, all we have to do is this, this, and this. It's logic, don't worry about it, it's going to work. And then that would just bring me out of my panic, because I would go into panic, like, I'm not going to be able to photograph this. And so I'm very aware of my own patterns. I always think I'm a great example around people, you know, for immune reactive. If you have any trouble, if you see me get into that place, you'll really know. But of course, through my life, I try to avoid getting into that place. But as we know, life has its way of bringing all kinds of lessons to us. Nervous sensitive, that's Bill himself. He's very, very sensitive. And they tends to be the nerve ring patterns, the very sensitive fibers. We're going to go over each of these in just a minute. The lymphatic sensitive, the lymphatic tophy around the edge, the lymphatic holding, the deeper lymphatic into the center. A lot of inherited toxins. With the lymphatic sensitive, the one above it, it's more like the heaven on earth type of person who really suffers with anything negative in the world. They really feel the whales, the dolphins, the rainforests. And in the mind, they tend to judge this is good and this is bad. And they sort of focus, they want the world to be like heaven. And it's very hard for them to accept that it isn't. And when you've met a few extreme examples of that type who are dying of cancer, and you hear their dialogue, and you hear their conversation, and you hear what they say, and we'll go more deeply over that in a minute. And then we have glandular, digestive, emotional, which opens up into the lacunas, which bring about more sympathy, more compassion, more emotional release. Really strong fiber types have very, much greater difficulty expressing themselves, releasing, communicating, feeling emotions. And in the RAID model, we'll find out tomorrow or the next day exactly how a person who is a lacuna person will often attract someone who has very strong fibers, because they balance each other. And we see a lot of fun in relationships. And then the lacuna really opening up to structurally opening. The circulatory hardening, where the circulatory lymph skin zone begin to display this white ring. And then the anxiety or nervous gastric, where you have a relationship between the nervous and digestive system, and this very strong expansion being matched by the equally strong contraction. But of course, there can be some anxiety types that aren't so strong in either direction, and that they tend to have a different pattern. So we'll take away this general one so that you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. And we're not separating out into brown or blue eye because they do display slightly differently. But we'll now go more deeply into each of the types. So the immune reactive, attack, defend. Just like the immune system is there to defend us against viruses, against bacteria, to help us fight flus and colds and infections. Just as the immune system is there to guard us and protect us, this becomes our attitude toward the world. Now there's two different aspects of the attitude, just like there's light and shadow in all of us. If you have that very strong wreath, it builds up, and it's called, what Dorothy Hall calls it, as a net. It rises up on the surface of the iris and also often has spokes come off it, and it forms what looks like a net. Now we know that a net is used for a certain purpose, like in the ocean. The water will go through it, but the fish will remain inside the net. So even though there are holes in the net, the basic structure is very, very strong. If you throw a net over someone who is a powerful, powerful gladiator, they can't function because it holds and contains them. So even though there are, challenges of weaknesses associated with this type and edges and borders where the immune reactive attack, defend response comes in, there also is this very strong tendency to creating your own reality, which is the net pattern. And this is what I've done in my life. I let everything go through, and I hold on to what I truly believe in. When I have difficulties, it's almost like I have to work it through my body until I can let it go. Work it through my mind and my feelings until I can let it go. And then I'm like, oh, here I am again. It's done. I released that one. But it is a kind of a net feeling where you have your structure of belief, which is very strong, which I do. I mean, I've held the school in existence over 25 years. I really believe in what I do. I'm a living example of what I do. I practice it. I do my cleanses every year. And I've selected out from the universe the things that I really, really believe in. It's my strength, but at the same time, I can't get into overload. And when I do get into overload, either from a person or a machine, or if I get too tired, whatever, that's exactly what I do. I go into reaction, and I go into a panic, like, ah, like that. And it feels like a shock. It entered me like a shock because I was a little tired and had so much to do that day. And I felt it go through me, And then the next thing was the tripod was forgotten. You know what I mean? And then I had less time for shopping before my cleaner came, so that was a big rush. And then the moment I got back, this woman called me from England, who was my student many years ago, and she has got cancer and fibroids. And it was like a series of things that just whoom, 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 like that. And so then I was incredibly sensitive. And by the end of the day, I really, really was feeling it. And I actually had to just go out and go to a movie and go to a club and steam and have an early night and just completely bring myself down. But the reason all that affected me was that, of course, I've been teaching for days and preparing for days, so that there was that not having the reserve. And this is what you always have to remember about this type. Where are they in their reserve quotient? And, I can be driving in the car with her going to Denver, and all of a sudden we're late, and all of a sudden there's a traffic jam. And all of a sudden she can't find her water bottle, and and it's sort of like one thing after another. And then I'll say, I've got a bit of a headache. Do you think you could turn the radio down? You never let me play music. And then I just go, okay, we're in immune reactive now because we know each other. And she goes, oh yeah, I did that again. But it's like the one little straw that puts you over the edge. That's what you have to remember about the immune reactive. The state of the adrenals, the energy of rest, and all of the factors that would play into having one stress after another stress after another stress that would bring you to the point of the straw, where all of a sudden you just go into it and you feel it and you really feel the panic and like that, and it very much affects how you breathe, and it's just like all of a sudden you're in the fight or flight response. I had so many things to deal with that day. It was quite amazing. And yet by Saturday morning, by the time class came around, understanding myself and my own needs, I was really able to be and really enjoy the day and have fun. And so that's a very important part of understanding your constitution, is how to meet your edge and know what that is and what that means, but also learn the skills of moving that through and restoring the balance and not having it go on for long periods of time. And so there's tremendous education that you can give people, so you can really help people to understand themselves and their reactions. And a large part of that movie last night, What the Bleep Do We Know, was about people meeting their edges. It was very good. They had all the little cells, you know, characterized as little people, and receptor sites and stimulations and peptides flooding, and it's great. Even Candace Purdy wrote that book that I really loved, The Molecules of Emotion. She was in the movie speaking about that side of things. So it is recognized by an autonomic nerve breath. I mean, for years in England when I was teaching, before all of this became so clear, people would go, I understand all the constitutional types, but I can never recognize an immune reactive. I always forget to look for the wreath. I don't quite get it. But since I've become such a great example, it's been a lot easier for people to understand. Because I understand myself so much better, through this work. So the nervous system and the adrenals are involved, and so the protective part comes in. When I teach, like in Iceland, I send out this letter that I have. I need a room that's quiet. I need a bathtub because I have to soak in oils. I don't go out for dinner after teaching. I'm happy to have lunch with people, but I don't have late nights. I get up early. I meditate. I have this whole list of parameters. And if I follow that list, if I break my rule, that's where I get into trouble. Last time I went to Iceland, this wonderful lady convinced me to stay in her country house. And it was hysterically comic. It was cosmic humor to the max. We got locked out when there was a freezing wind. I had to sit in a freezing car for an hour while she went from neighbor to neighbor's house. I didn't get to bed till midnight. I was frozen. The bathtub only had that much hot water in it. I couldn't get warm. Then I had to leave first thing in the morning, and I had to be on TV at 8:30. I was a complete wreck. When I watched that TV show, my eyes are blinking, and my face is sort of doing strange things. But I'm having a fun time because it's a minister of parliament of the Ecological Green Party, and I'm telling her about her iris, and she's crying, and everything she's saying is true. And we're on 7 o'clock prime time that night, so you can see the cosmic humor. But I really paid for that, and so I finally said to her, I have to move into a hotel. As much as I love this country house, obviously, I can't. And that's one of the reasons I think I finally got the throat thing at the end of my visit, because it isn't even the country house. It's the way that life arranges itself around you when you know your limits and then you break your rules. It's fascinating. You really need to figure out what it is you need for yourself and to really honor those things if you want to keep the balance going. And some of the things that happened to me are just like that. I mean, cosmic humor, being locked out that night. Oh my God, I wonder I didn't catch pneumonia. So anyway, so sympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system dominance. So when you have these reactions, the sympathetic nervous system is reacting to the outside stimuli, which has somehow repeated and repeated shock after shock, or enough stimulation. Now, if you can imagine a person in a chronic illness state, having got to a point where they can't receive anything, without reacting. And people actually exist like this. Their nervous system is to such a severe degree, and the adrenals, they can have trauma after trauma. And it can also, develop also because of internal anxiety patterns and so on. Acute conditions, inflammatory hyperactivity. Yeah, that night I was just like, I went to see this movie. I went to see Born Supremacy. I didn't care what I saw. I just arrived at the movie house and I just went, what movie's starting? It was Born Supremacy. And here he is, escaping being murdered continuously and trying to track down his identity. And I'm just sitting there like a zombie. And it's just like it's just flashing and I'm just going, wow, it doesn't even bother me. But I felt actually just rested, like just being in the movie. But and there was even more things to that day. Fast reaction needs to be slowed down. So what is a fast reaction? It's a vibratory rate inside of you that vibrates like this. See, usually my vibratory rate is very easy, it's very relaxed, I'm happy, I enjoy my house, I enjoy my life, I deal with things, try to just keep everything moving along. And when I get into that immune reactive, I can just feel my whole body going like this. Just like that. It's just such a fast kind of adrenal kind of shock thing. It just changes everything about myself. So that gives you a very good idea. So attack, defend, react, all those things come into it. Ideally, if you're living in more of the net part of yourself, you're just letting things go through, you're taking deep breaths, and as things happen, you adjust, and you rest, and you nap, or you meditate, or you go to the gym, or you walk in the garden, you water your plants. You have the things around you that you know are going to slow your vibration down if it starts to speed up. What herbs to take, what foods to have, what to drink, like that. In this particular constitution, it's stronger than anything in that immune reaction. And so let's move on to the next one. Lymphatic sensitive. Just as I mentioned before, this is the heaven on earth type. I had an experience about maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago when I was living in New Mexico. I stayed with some friends for a couple of weeks during summer school. Very dear friends of mine, really magnificent couple, doing a lot of work in the spirituality world, the beautiful healing center, and spiritual community, and just so many, living so many ideals. And when I arrived at the house, he was ill, and he just had a small operation. And I was able to give him a core treatment and some reflexology and polarity and cranial, and the problems that he was having with kidney function just immediately cleared out. And a few days later, he said, I've always wanted you to look in my eyes. Would you look in my eyes? And just tell me, because he knew about the Iridology. And I looked in his eyes and I almost fainted. Here is this leader of this spiritual community. And he literally had the most heaven on earth eyes I have ever seen. They were so strong, so bold, so white. But yet some of them were beginning to merge as if they were beginning to form a circulatory hardening. And he is moving along in life, and he does have a certain detachment, very cerebral, kind of theosophical approach to life, and retreat-oriented, even though he has a community, he knows how to preserve his own space. And so I was able to talk to him. I said, about this lymphatic heaven on earth, I said, what you created around you is like the 100% perfect example of what a strong type of this person would do. Spiritual community in every way. Just absolutely beautiful, acres and acres and acres and acres of land, the most pristine place with spiral earth and crystals and everything you can imagine. And I said, but there is one difficulty here, that if you start separating yourself and turning this into a white ring, you will actually start detaching, but also create a physical problem. And so that was very, very interesting to me. And I've had cancer patients. Once I had a lady fly from England to spend a week with me, and she was a lymphatic sensitive person. And basically, I just listened to her the first couple of hours. We spent several hours together every day doing all kinds of treatments, and I just can't take the world anymore. The only time I feel like myself is when I'm in bed with my cats and dogs, can't watch television, can't look at a newspaper. The world is so terrible. All the things that are happening in it, and the animals are all being mistreated, and you know, and it's like by the time I got through with her consultation and educated her about her type and the severity of the cancer, they were wanting to do all these, you know, chemotherapies and operations and things like that. And I said, well, you know, you could go to the Gerson Cancer Clinic. Oh, no, I couldn't possibly go there. My mother-in-law, she depends on me every single Saturday to go to the market with her. And I said, well, don't you think your mother-in-law would want you to get well? Don't you think, you know, she would understand that you need to go to Mexico and to go to this? Oh, I couldn't tell her. I couldn't have her worry. No, I couldn't do that. And also, you know, I have this business, and all my employees are depending upon me, and even though I run most of it, you know, from my bedroom, from my home, because I don't feel very well, it's like I couldn't desert them, and I wouldn't do that. No, a good person wouldn't do that. And I said, but sometimes you have to take care of yourself first, you know, so you can take care of other people. Yeah, I spent a week with her. I gave her packs and poultices, reflexology, polarity, everything you could think of, hours of counseling, homeopathy box. I could not break through this. And she said, I'll do everything, I'll take all the herbs, I'll do everything, and I'm sure if God wants me to live, I'll live. And then I heard from the person that had actually sent me, you know, her to me to come all the way to Boulder, Colorado, that she had passed away. And she said, you're not going to believe it. She said, just when she was literally to the point where she was very near death, she agreed to go to Mexico to this cancer clinic, but they told her that it was too late. But even so, they started giving her the treatment. But she said she didn't focus on her treatment. And I said, well, what did she do? Every single day she went out into the streets of Mexico and rescued dogs and got papers for them to be treated and shipped, you know, by flying to England for people to take care of. I mean, to her, all she still wanted to do was clean up the world. All she still wanted to do was act out the lymphatic system. This is bad, this is good. This is bad, this is good. And so sometimes I have to talk very strongly to these types. And I just have to say, you know what? You are not God. You cannot see with your mind what is really good and what is really bad. You have judged that from yourself. You have selected and separated, but you are not God. We cannot see why these things exist. And yes, we can go, my heart hurts for all the suffering in the world. You know, it's like to the degree of that she was harming herself with these thoughts. It can be quite extraordinary. So you see really strong cases like that. You never forget it. It's unbelievable how people suffer because of the unconscious energies and actions and reactions of the constitutional types, particularly when they're very strong. Cleaning, clearing negativity, avoiding bad things. So judgment can be a very difficult issue with this type of person. And the fact that somebody wants to create a spiritual community and do something good in the world is really positive. And you can be very, you know, do some really beautiful things with this type. My youngest granddaughter is this type. The first few months of her life, I was sure she was an angel in a human body. I mean, the way her being was, her eyes, her happiness, her laughter, her beautiful being of stillness, and you would hold her, you would just, I mean, literally, you felt like she was an angel. And she still is one of the happiest, most laughter-filled little beings I know. Her other side has definitely come in, you know, but it's like the tendency is really there. The raised autonomic nerve breath can sometimes be there, lymphatic rosary, judgment and idealism. A really strong ideal as to how they think things should be. It's very much related to the #1 Enneagram type. For those of you who got the emails on the Enneagrams, I think everybody did. You know, it's a very strong #1. It can be in its negative aspect. Imagines perfection, wants only good things, resists bad things, blocks the flow of the in and the out. No, I won't have that in my life. I can't read a newspaper. I can't. And so the reactive aspect of this person is to bad things, what they consider bad. Either that, or they can become an activist, and they can plunge into politics, they can plunge into improving the world, cleaning up the world, helping the world. They can exhaust themselves with trying to make things better. And we all have all of these things. This is what we have to remember. But these types have them in such excess and such depth and such extremity at times that you're absolutely amazed to see a person's life and how they're living and reacting and suffering. So we want to be able to select things, but not to judge things. We want to be able to create beauty, but not with the anger, resentment, and reaction against the things that are not. We have to deal, we live in a world of duality. We live with all sides, and so we have to honor and respect that. All right, let's move on to the next one. So lymphatic holding is, once again, the lymphatic system, but in a completely different way, where they have inherited or have got, you know, such lymphatic congestion to such a depth that the lymphatic system is no longer able to handle it. So, you know, several cases, I don't see too many of this type, but some of the cases in England were people that had been born out of families that had histories of syphilis and gonorrhea, or very, very strong tubercular families, where they inherited physical weakness in this way where things were in the tissues. And there was one particular student client that I worked with for years that had all of those things in her life pattern, plus a very indiscriminate teenage youth in the 60s, where she had also contracted those same illnesses through, you know, very free sexuality. And it was a project of years, and as a part of it, cervical dysplasia of the cancer level 3 was also cleared. She moved from this absolutely wild person who now is an expert and an author on flower essences, lives in the country, a renowned polarity therapist, many, many qualities, in a small community she's living. And so, and married somebody very well off, very creative, from, you know, not having any relationship at all and being a single parent, and also adopting out children that she couldn't raise that were illegitimate. And so moving from a whole pattern into a complete change of life was what I observed. And in some cases, the people absolutely could not receive healing. And they would say, I can't do this. No way I can do this. No. And purification is the path to release the inheritance, to release what they have received, you know, from their family. They're already too full. They already are holding too much, so the lymphatic system cannot deal with anymore. So they either are in a sort of deep, dark, chronic place, or they are in an acute reactivity place. In either case, it's like it's all too much, can't have any more. So it's an energy pattern of no more, no more, no more. Can't have more. So the lymphatic system is really saying that. Already too full. The difficult flow of giving and receiving is definitely a part of it. And so purification, they can't release and they can't receive often. So by doing the deep purification and releasing the inherited toxins from the past and choosing a lifestyle, moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day, anyone can do that at any time. Moment by moment, choice by choice, to create a new vibration, new thought forms, new everything. And 7 years down the line, a completely new body, every cell replaced. You know, and so that's what you do. You really inspire them to purification. You really want these people to be very careful about diet, to be able to experience cleansing. A place like the Ann Wigmore Institute would be excellent. You know, you might want to recommend to this person like a 3-month stay if they could totally learn a complete new lifestyle and learn all the tools so that they wouldn't go back into addictions or unconscious habit patterns. But you don't see too many of these, but definitely recognize it. And sometimes in an iris, you might just see one part of the iris that has that in it, where there just is much more congestion on unlimited level. So we could have the next one. The nervous sensitive. Vibrating, tuning, awareness, sensitivity of the nervous system. That's what Bill said to me when he was here the other day helping me. When he went home, he said, I've never realized lately, I never really realized until I had this inflammation in my foot just how incredibly sensitive I am. He said, I've always been pushing away that part of me. He said, I knew I was a sensitive guy, he said, but I had no idea how incredibly sensitive I really am. How much I feel things, how much I don't. When a person says something, what I feel from that person, how I know things behind what they're saying. And he was just talking to me for about 5-10 minutes outside, and I was just going, it's taken him just a little over a year and several gatherings before last year's summer school, and he's finally connecting really deeply with his basic constitutional type and really feeling his sensitivity. But it took the foot to kind of get him to be immobile, not to be able to walk around, not to be able to do a lot of the things that he does, and so on, for him to come in enough to really feel that. And I said, well, how's that going to change your life? And he said, well, for one reason, I'm going to be a lot more honest about what I feel behind what people say and how I interact with them. He said, because a lot of the time I receive the information, but I don't actually share it. And I have this whole other agenda going on inside of me. So I said, oh, Bill, do you have an agenda with me? And he goes, oh, no way, everything's out in the open with you. But, you know, so this vibrating, tuning sensitivity, it's almost like their fibers in their eye are like little antennae. And they look like that. They're kind of wiry, and they look like they're vibrating at this very, very, very high-pitched, kind of very fast, very, very sensitive. And this is the kind of constitutional type which is totally nervous system. And this is where you find the most transversals. This is where you find the nervous system itself creating transversals in areas of stress, to find perhaps a way to bypass or to deal with the overload. We can only sometimes imagine what it is that the body is doing. Often it's also accompanied by a large pupil, which is sympathetic dominance, but the large pupil can be related to fatigue, can be related to overstimulation, not being able to deal with all the information that's coming. They seek protected, gentle environments. Areas living up in the mountains, in nature. They know they're sensitive and they want to protect themselves. And you have all these notes in your handouts for the summer. So this should help it. We'll be going over this more and more, and then as we read through on your eyes, and you see the person, the constitution, you've been together a week and more, and you're going to be able to really understand things. Sensitivity and the nervous system. So this person could have an illness or a problem. They could have symptom pretty well anywhere in their body. The nervous sensitive person could say have a lacuna in the kidneys and have some kidney problems because they eat a highly acidic diet. And so as an iridologist, you would look at that picture and you would know that if this person wanted to get well, that they would have to have extensive nutrition for their nervous system and adrenals as the underlying foundation. Why are they overeating acid foods? Are they nervous? Are they in a situation which is not good for them? And then you talk to them about their work, you talk to them about the home, and then you hear about the stresses and the factors that are affecting their nervous system. Unbelievable tales of what people endure. And then their constitutions reach the edge. And then they begin to suffer the consequences. And you have to counsel in the most basic way sometimes. One time I had to tell this couple in England who had found their dream home after many years to sell their house. From the moment they moved into the house, they began to get sick. There was a lot of trees, there was no sunshine, it was damp, there was water running underneath it, and there was an electric. And it was the most beautiful little house in the world. It was a death trap. Sometimes, a person will walk in and have sores all over their body, and they'll just go, this is one of first people that ever came to me many, many years in Mount Shasta, long before I was even trained as a professional. But I had healed my own breast cancer, and I'd read Jethro Kloss and Back to Eden, and I knew a lot. I knew more than I thought I knew, and I was doing all the things with whole foods and herb teas and everything, and this person walked in my house, and I don't know what's happened to me in the last few days. Look at, and she had sores all over herself, and they were like bleeding and seeping, and it was, I just looked at her, and then I just like something flashed into my mind that I had read in Jethro Kloss, and I said, did you just buy an aluminum pan recently? And she said, yes. She said, I just bought one of those cookers, electric cookers, and she said, I leave, and I said, well, what do you do with the food at the end of the day? And she said, I leave it in the pot overnight, and then I heat it up again at lunchtime. And she had aluminum poisoning. So amazing once you become really receptive, and once you just really, what drops in. And this is a very mysterious thing, because I had the information I had read. I'd thought about it when I read it. Wow, I'm never going to have aluminum pans. They're kind of dangerous. Even if they're Teflon coated, they can get scratches on them. And so, you know, many, many things will come out of this nervous sensitivity. But to recognize your own limits, to recognize that there'll be certain herbs, certain teas, certain kinds of foods. And then I had mentioned earlier last week, in one of the elements, how people are often eating their own poison. Now I know that when I go over my edge and become immune reactive, that I want sweet immediately. And I can have a little bit of sweet, and it will calm me down. I learned that in England. I didn't have that until I was in England. It was accumulation of the damp, and my huge clinic and my school, and all kinds of things, educating my children, and sometimes it would just go. And I learned that if I had sweet in the afternoon, that I would calm down. But if I have too much sweet, it goes in the other direction, and then I can't sleep all night. So you can have a little bit of something that will, you know, help you to get over something, but if you overindulge, it goes to the opposite. And that's a very interesting lesson to learn. And sometimes I do go over the edge with it, and then I have to pay. So stimulation and exhaustion come from this. Either too much or not enough. Too much stimulation, or they can just protect themselves so much and stay away so much that they don't, you know, really have much interaction. They can become very easily hermits, very, very sensitive. And I think there is an Enneagram hermit type, but I can't remember the number at the moment. But so stimulation and then the exhaustion that comes from having the nervous system and the adrenals on overload. If you happen to be living or working in some situation where you're being aggravated all the time. And then, of course, if your diet is leaching calcium, the junk food diet is well known to leach calcium out of the system. And so you want to be sure that all of those things are covered, you know, in the formulas and in the nutrition, so that what the nervous system needs is going to be there. And the next one. Glandular, digestive, emotional. These are all my names, by the way. They're sort of evolving, you know. When the lacuna open up in the iris and bring about this opening up into the emotional body. And Henry Johnson was really great in his contribution with Rayed in showing us that the emotional body is connected with the lacuna. And this brings about expression and release, creativity, release of emotions, sharing of emotions, glandular and digestive systems involved, because the lacuna often open up right over an adrenal, right over a kidney, right over a liver, right over a heart, right over a spleen, right in a thyroid, in a pancreas. It's amazing how those little leaf lacunas. Now, we had clinical training in July, and one of the things we did, or perhaps it was at the gathering for the clinical training, you might have been there, I can't remember exactly, but we got all the people that were this type together, and what they realized when they reported back to the group was that they all felt nourished by nature, and then of course their patterns are leaves and flower petals. And it was very interesting how they determined and shared their experiences, and it made me think it's really true. So flower lacunae in digestive and glandular areas. They're structurally, yes, structurally a little weaker. They're not so goal-oriented. They can't abuse their body all night and day and eat anything they want like the really strong silk types. But they're more responsive, whereas a silk type might say, I want all those 100 people to work for me, and I want them to build my dream, and I'll pay them as little as possible, and and they can just work for me, and and maybe after 20 years they might have a little piece of land. You can see a silk person saying that, but a glandular, digestive, emotional would go, I just really want like-minded people to come together, and we can work and we can realize our goals, but let's dance at night, and let's paint on Saturdays, and grow herbs and flowers. And you can sort of see at a different approach as to how a goal-oriented, really strong pioneer type would envision a community as to how this type would envision a community. There would be more social action. There would be meetings at night for people to share. The really strong, goal-oriented person would have a meeting at night in order to tell everyone what to do. So there is a real difference, in the textures of the iris as well. So this texture is opening up into communication, into expression. And it's lovely to have one or two of these in the eye if you are a strong constitutional type. I just, there's a lacuna in the heart here. This is so wonderful. You have all this strong physical possibility, but there it is, the opening in the heart into feeling and expression. And you just kind of inspire people to really see the positive sides of it. So they are emotionally stronger, more responsive, and sometimes the silk type people are so into their goal that they stop feeling. If this is going back to some of the older times, but in the olden days there must have been there were a lot of these pioneer types around, and women could be widows and could be starving when their husband had died on the job, and you just hear these horrific stories. Whereas a bull, this silk-minded pioneer couldn't care less. He might say, you can go and pick up the scraps of coal, and think that they were really being generous. Whereas somebody like this would have a lot more empathy and feeling, and would be more involved in supporting and protecting and taking care of things, other human beings. Because they feel more. They know that other people have feelings. It's not just about getting somewhere and making something happen. Next one. Wait a minute. Inhibited expression stops the natural expression. See, they can be stopped. You can have an introverted flower type. A child that was just wanting to do this, but was always stopped and pushed in, became introverted through circumstances in life. Just because they're a particular type doesn't mean they're expressing it. And so sometimes you have to bring a person out and say, go and dance, get some paints, journal every morning, let it flow. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Get the energy moving if it's been inhibited. And the other thing, if they can't digest events, they can't release. So their experience of life is a lot about digesting. Talking to these people, they will tell you themselves that they need to digest things and move things through. And if something gets stuck, if they can't digest something, if they can't forget or forgive or deal or solve, it can really hold on inside of them, and they can become incredibly uncomfortable. I experience some of that also whenever I have a difficult experience. It's like I have to move it all the way through me and go into all of its permutations and kind of digest it before I can release it. And then I always need to communicate at the end what I really truly feel. And because I have quite a lot of lacuna as well, I've got a combination in my type. But this type really does need to complete and release. The releasing is essential for this type on all levels, physical elimination, right through all the levels. Release and complete so that you can be creative in yourself. Okay, next one. Structurally open. One more step down again with the physical being weaker, having to take care of themselves. They can tend to apathy, they can lay around. They can be dreamers in their minds, or they can delegate. Let everyone else do the hard work, and then they can just relax and be themselves. So they do have energy and physical limitations, but they're a survivor adjuster type. Dorothy Hall in her work did research about that these people would be the last ones to be alive in the ghetto. These people would be the last ones to be alive on a boat. They sort of adjust and relax into things rather than fighting them and using energy. And they have a way of creating community, a way of making things work. Whereas some of the other types might just slowly kill each other off. This type would be more interested in the community surviving. They can tend to fantasy instead of manifestation. They can dream in their head, keep in their own world. Sometimes these people can just like entirely live inside their own minds and not really do anything. Imagining, but never doing. They're open. They're open pretty much to everything that's coming. They're strongly social, but weak physical. It's very difficult for them often to say no. They tend to be very open and relaxed in that way. Next one. Anxiety, nervous gastric, nervous digestive. Maybe yes, maybe no. So many people. One time when I was teaching in Malaysia, there was 45 of these people in the room. And about 7 of other types. They're strongly kinesthetic. They feel things. And if you ask them to go out or to plan an event, they go, oh, that's a really good idea, but I might need to just check in on that morning to see whether I want to go. And they might go, oh yeah, maybe yes, or maybe no, I'm not really sure. And indecision or conflict is a very big thing, just like what I was talking about the girl who wanted to come to summer school. Yes, I want to come. No, I can't come. Yes, I want to come. No, I can't come. So indecision and conflict ends up taking all the energy and resources instead of actually being able to just do and follow through. So it's a combination here of the digestive and the nervous systems interacting together. Radiating up from the center is that will to do, to dream, to achieve your goals. Oh, I really want to be a doctor. Oh, but I can't. My mother's sick. I have to be here for her. Oh, but I really want to be a doctor. Maybe I could get a scholarship, but then what would she do? Or I really want to go to Bali, but I only get 2 weeks off, and if I ask for more time, they might fire me. And so you feel people, stopping themselves with the fear. And combination of these radials and nerve rings. I remember one of the first types that I really identified with this many years ago in England. I brought Harry Wolf to England, the iridologist Harry Wolf, and he's a very strong type like this. And one day we were talking over a meal, and I was asking him about his life, and he said, I'm just this homeopath, and I'm just all day long, and he even took his arms like this, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm just details and information and case histories, and then he said, at night I just go out and I just sing and dance. I have my own rock band, and he's even describing it with his body. And then I said, well, wow. And he said, but when I'm really myself, I'm out in the desert camping. And I just went, wow, that was so cool. Because he completely acted out all the different sides and ended up in his kinesthetic, feeling, nature-oriented self, where he could settle and just feel his own energy. Isn't that interesting? If you really listen to people, they are totally telling you the truth about their life. But we have to have the consciousness to understand all these different levels and what they mean in order to interpret it and kind of mirror it back. So radials and nerve rings together, a vacillation of the opposites of expansion and contraction, yes and no. But because of this ability to go into both sides, they can be great mediators. It's like that can be their highest role. I can understand this person, I can understand that person, and now let's create an understanding and figure out what's the best thing to do. the advice I often give these people, it's like when they're in conflict, I go, listen to your mind for a while. Explore the yes, explore the no. See the price you pay, decide what you really want to do, and then if you don't know, let it go. Don't think about it, don't analyze it, don't anxiety it, let it go, let it go. And every once in a while check in, do I know the answer yet? No, let it go. Check in a couple of days later, do I know the answer? No. Sometimes transition can take a while. Eventually, the whole complex of the decision will settle into their physical being. And one morning they will wake up and they'll just go, I know, this is what I have to do. And I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to let go. I'm willing to manifest. I'm willing to do what I want to do. And then see what happens. Which is what happens with any choice. They can understand both sides. They can be excellent mediators. They can pulse between expansion and contraction. They can act out both sides and thoroughly enjoy it. And then the grounded feeling quality, the stillness that comes from settling into your being, is actually the truth of it. And that's why on the day they'll suddenly go, I don't really feel like going today. I've had several friends like this. Can't plan anything with them. And it's sometimes amazing that they continue to be there for your friend, because you can't count on them for anything. You just have to know in your heart that they literally won't know. If it's something they absolutely have to do, they'll do it anyway, but if they have a choice, often they won't. I just feel like staying home today. I don't want to go anywhere. Well, we planned this. Can't help it. And so those are the different dynamics. And the suffering that can accompany any of these types can be extraordinary when you start getting the case histories and really understanding.
Suffering from the indecision or just suffering?
Well, whatever the quality is of the constitutional type. Different things for different people. But in that case, it would be the conflict. Unable to solve or release or solve a conflict, unable to leave a situation that was bad for them. Those type of people will go on for years in a situation, in work, or because every time they try to talk themselves out of going, then they talk themselves, you see. And so much energy is wasted in that conflict situation, instead of just getting on with things. So here we have circulatory hardening. Most of the times this comes later on in life as an aging process, but I have seen it in young people. And one case comes to mind in England. He was a video man for a rock and roll band, the Rolling Stones, and he traveled all around the world with the Rolling Stones. And at one point during his treatment, he bought me a scrapbook and showed me all the stuff that he'd been doing. But all of a sudden, even though he was barely 40, he started getting all these aches and pains in his shoulders, and he couldn't carry and work the video camera, and he got this time off to get well. And he came and saw me, and we got him on this very strong program. I had him buy a juicer, I had him buy a water distiller, high amounts of herbs, and intensive amounts of vegetable juices and greens, and it was very interesting. He never ended up going back to the Rolling Stones. He ended up selling his London house. He bought a house in the country. He had his son move in with him after being estranged for years, and took responsibility for his teenage years. He started a garden. He studied Gerda Boyesen technique and became a practitioner. Entirely different kind of life. Evolved out of the dissolving. And actually he was trying to protect himself in that world by creating a barrier of that white wall. It was obviously killing him. And so you can get some and I remember another woman who had a very strong circulatory hardening, and she must have been in her 70s or early 80s, and she's one of these incredible British women. I mean, when you see them, they're just amazing. They're full of life, and they're on the bicycle, and they're just talking. The only symptom she had was deafness. I got her on the water distiller and the juices and all these things, and she was really doing well. She would come see me. I lived in the country 9 miles out of Cambridge, up on a hill called Lulworth. This woman in her late 70s or early 80s, white hair, would bicycle 9 miles on this busy, busy, busy road and up the hill. And when I moved from that house, she came to visit me in a winter storm on her bicycle the day that I was moving. I mean, she was unbelievable. And her only symptom was the deafness, which we never really got healed, but we certainly did prevent. I guess it had already rigidified or whatever in the eardrum, but we certainly did prevent a lot of other things because she remained so active. And I told her, I said, bicycling is the best thing that you can do. And she did a lot of it. And so there can be, and in another case was just manic depressive. That was how she experienced her symptoms. It isn't always that a circulatory hardening is going to produce a certain type of symptom. It can be a brown eye, it can be a blue eye, it can happen over a nervous sensitive, it can happen over an anxiety gastric, it can happen over a glandular digestive emotional eye. You see, the white ring can appear on any eye. And so it's going to be in relationship to that, it's going to be in relationship to what other things show up in the iris. It's going to be so many things, their culture, what it is they're trying to separate from. My mother developed this in her aging years, and she became completely lost in her own world. The last time I visited her, I stayed at her house instead of my sister's house because I wanted to video her for a memory. And she'd say, let's watch television, because she had to speak really loud. And I could, oh, what a great idea. And we'd find a program, and we'd be sitting there. 5 minutes later, she'd leap up, turn off the television, and just disappear out the front door as if I didn't exist. I mean, she literally would forget that I was like sitting next to her. And they get into the extreme states of they're just in their own world. And they're not aware of other people, they're not responding to other people. And she wouldn't let people buy anything for her. And my sisters were really aggravated because she needed new shoes, she needed a new purse, and she'd just go, nope, nope, nope. And so I just took her into town one day, and I just took her into this shop, and I bought her new shoes, and somehow I managed to do it. And then I bought her a new purse, but she held on to her old one, and she would not let it go. And I said, oh, let's go for lunch then. And I had the new one, and she had the old one. And we went to the art gallery. I remember that restaurant there in the court, near the courthouse in the art gallery in Vancouver, BC. And I said, oh, let's go sit on the grass. And here we were on the grass with our lunch with all these people around. And at one point, I just grabbed her old purse, dumped everything on the ground, got up and put it in the bin. And she just sat there like, ah! Ah! These people were like watching. I just made my moment. And then once I had everything in her new purse, she was as happy as anything. And she was just, you know, like a child, like really, this was like the last couple of months of her life. And she had walked, 12 miles a day for years. And I think the fact that she finally passed when she was nearly 90 and only had a very, very, very short time where she was like not able to function was because of all the walking. Because that's what keeps the circulation flowing. But you see some of the patterns that emerge in people, the non-awareness. It creates a barrier to change. She didn't even want new shoes or a new purse. Rigidity. They don't want to listen to other people's ideas. Lack of sympathetic response to the world and others. They're building a wall. Parasympathetic dominance, disappearing into their own world. Intense will to resist, stubbornness, won't listen. My mother was like that. She used to advertise in her 60s for people to argue with. In the paper you would see, if you don't believe in reincarnation, call me. And then they would phone. And then she'd be on the phone and she'd be happy as anything. And she would meet these people and talk to them and argue with them. It's fascinating. I said, Mom, you should have been a lawyer. But you can learn a lot from every type. Resistance, separation, parasympathetic dominance, resistance. Disappearing into your own world. And it's nice to have your own world. But it's nice to be in relationship to the world around you. You've got to have both. Parasympathetic and sympathetic. Keep them both going for a healthy evolution into your elder years, for sure. Next one, last one, or almost last one, a couple more, I think.
So you would recommend exercise for people like that?
We'll go more into the treatment side later, and it's all in Herbs of Grace as well. Herbs of Grace has a complete treatment rundown for each of the types. Mixed color. We have people from mixed cultures, people who have a bit of the brown-eyed culture and also the blue-eyed, Mediterranean mixes, intermarriages. And what we have observed over the years is that the brown-eyed cultures are more extended family. They have longer relationships, and the South to some degree has been more as a part of the group, like in India, which I'm very familiar with, having been there so many times. And during their teenage years, every weekend the kids are going off to visit this auntie or that grandmother or this wedding or this engagement. They're always with the family and the extended family. And there's many good things about that. An obscure second cousin will end up paying for someone to go to university, and uncles will take care of people in the family, and so there is an extended care system, but on the other side it can also be very difficult and imprisoning and controlling depending upon all the dynamics that are going on. But there is, the extended cultures, and so then you have the blue-eyed people that come from the north, and they're more, reactive, and they have less sun, and they have more individualistic, and they show acute symptoms more. And so some of that information is good to understand without letting it take over your mind. But that's the main thing, that you never want to let any of these models or ideas so that you look at a person and just go, oh, they've got that, I know that. We don't do that. We take that as a part of the picture and then see what the influence is and where they are with it and so on. But the brown iris, and the blue iris can be at opposite, and yet when they mix in the mixed iris, sometimes there can be confusion, because in the brown iris, symptoms take longer to manifest on the surface. There tends to be what is called a silent pathology, where things just simmer underneath. Levels of endurance, level of non-reaction to things happening in the body. And indeed, in India, it's so much like that. People hardly pay attention to things. They just let things be, and whereas, a lot of time, people go, oh, I've got this pain, I've got that pain, this is happening, that's happening. Oversensitivity, in a sense, to one's physical being. So sometimes there can be a confusion or an alternation in a mixed color person, but it's not really one of the most important aspects of the constitution. It's sometimes people go, is that a brown eye, or is it a mixed eye, or whatever, and it really doesn't make much difference to your treatment, it doesn't make much difference to your education. It might bring inequality sometimes. And then you might want to see, under purification, under an in-depth healing module, would more blue come? Would the green fade out? Would the yellow depart? Would central heterochromia get less? Is it a brown eye? Is it a central heterochromia? You can think about that, but you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think it's going to make a difference to how the person gets well. But it can be a gauge for you to watch how the eye changes in response to things. Shifts from acute to repressed symptoms, head-heart conflicts, all these things are there. And having been a multicultural person, having lived in Canada, having lived in England, having lived in India, and traveled a lot in many cultures, worked with many people from many different cultures. I mean, I really enjoy multicultural being. I just find that very enriching. And you can learn so much from watching, how different cultures are. The velvet brown type. In the cultural system, there is more of a suppression of the ego, and also along with that a suppression of symptoms. Delayed symptoms, endurance, things of the family or the community before the self. And even within this, there can be many shades. I've seen brown eyes that are almost like black. I've seen brown eyes that are all the way shades and velvety. And then you also have radii solaris, you have lacuna. Sometimes within the wreath, there's very dramatic kind of like a ridging, like the stomach halo, which is white in the blue iris, except in the brown iris it's more like grooves. And there could be heights and depths, nerve rings. Sometimes there's pigmentation, sometimes there's a grayness around the edge, but it's very dramatic and very clear usually with the brown eye. And sometimes with a brown eye, it's like it seems like you can't quite understand what's going on because it's so simple. And so depending on that, you would want to pay more or less attention to the case history. I mean, Iridology is so different with each person. You know, it's really coming down to how is it, what is going to benefit this person, how can I give them understanding about themselves, how can I guide their healing treatment, how can I watch how the healing treatment is improving the person, either through the iris, you know, or the symptoms. And so there definitely are limitations to iris readings. There are limitations to analysis and to so on, but there's so much information that usually doesn't matter who the person is or what's happening. We can give them something really valuable that will be useful to them for the rest of their life.